Fred, you mentioned that the visitor and convention input regarding the Fareless issue have we solicited input from the business community at large?
The business association that's probably best able to address that is the Portland Business Association, PBA, and they actually, Carolyn, they adopted an actual resolution, or?
Actually, they put together a special task force that addressed this issue.
Why don't you use the microphone there?
Thank you, Mr. President. The Portland Business Alliance did have a special task force that they solicited membership from most of the downtown stakeholders, including Portland State, Portland Travel, the different business associations, downtown restaurant owners, etc., the convention center, Lloyd TMA, and then they invited other stakeholders to come and speak to them so they could really understand this issue. And they issued a report. When I presented on this topic a few months ago, you might recall that Bernie Bottomley came to represent the Portland Business Alliance, and at that time said that they had unanimously voted to support the rail-only option. So Portland Business Alliance has supported the rail-only option after some extensive research.
Okay, thank you. Rick?
I think we're really on the right track. When I've been tracking Fareless Square, the process, and the alternatives that were identified after that first initial public comment session, I really think we're moving in the right direction, and I really think it's going to be to make those changes and simplify the system for operators and so forth. So we're engaging in that process and coming up with some pretty good alternatives that didn't seem as available to us initially. So it's really good.
I might also add that in that process, the earlier process where we did solicit comments from the general public as well, the majority of those comments supported the rail-only option. So we have a preliminary outreach and results from that when we put all of those options out.
Fred, I had one other question about when we changed the interval between frequent bus service, have we projected any loss in ridership or passenger ridership or boardings or anything like that, or do you really are we predicating this on that we're not going to lose ridership by reducing the number of buses?
If you read or look at the formulas that are used to be able to predict exactly what will happen, those formulas are graded by each minute, and that would tell you that that we will lose some ridership. In truth, I think with minor adjustments such as this, unless one gets to a really crowded sort of setting, I will venture that we will not. Again, in the slower economy, we are seeing some reduction, but that I don't believe would be related to the travel on our system. Now, it may mean that if somebody were going to take just a 2 or 3 stop trip, they might choose to walk instead of taking that trip. But I think it's going to be in a minor sort of setting in that regard.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Fred, tonight, of course, I'm one who supports Fareless Square, and I'll still have to be convinced to vote against it. But I understand what's going on here. But overall, look, I see our mission as more service and less cost to the public. Understanding where we're going, I think we got to look for other sources of revenue here. And let's look at who benefits the most out of public transportation. I think we got to give to the employers, the merchants. See that, maybe they're willing to pay more money into the system to make sure the system still operates more efficiently with less cost. I mean, people got to get to work. And it goes even further. The green machine is on the move. And if we want to reduce the carbons and everything else and less congestion, it's in public transportation. So I think we got to start looking at, because this economy's not turning around for 5 years. I mean, there's nothing turning it around. I mean, I'm very familiar with the freight industry because we represent it. And incidentally, the freight industry's going down. I mean, they're hurting out there. We've got more layoffs in the freight industry than we've ever had in the history of it. And some of these trucking companies are suffering and going out of business. So, I mean, there's a correlation here that says we're not going to be on an upturn for a while. So and I will ask the question, Fred, you guys know more than I about it, but can we go for other sources of revenue? And I think we ought to try it and get serious about it.
Maybe just to that last point then, right now the federal government, the U.S. Congress is wrestling with what is called the reauthorization of the transportation bill. It currently expires on September 30th. They do a 6-year redo of the bill. Chairman Oberstar has just introduced earlier this week his version of what that should look like. There is substantially more money in it. At this stage, I do not believe there's any operating revenue in it. It's more building of service rather than necessarily operating and continuing to operate that. But there's been much discussion around the issues of should the federal government be more involved in operating. It doesn't do much good to buy buses if you can't pay for the operators to run them across the country. But that's something that we're very engaged in at the federal level, and I do believe that is the place where this debate has to be had.
Okay.
Just a clarification, so the streetcar line is included in Fareless Square under this proposal?
The answer is yes, they currently are as well within Fareless. As you may know, that on both the northwestern end as well as the southeastern end of the current streetcar, they are outside of the current Fareless, and that they would be accordingly here. We would expect, however, that streetcar within the current boundaries would continue to be able to respect Fareless element, but I think there's been concern expressed about whether they really do much enforcement even outside of the current Fareless. But we would expect that in the current area that is really along 11th and 12th, which is the main backbone that reflects the north-south movement within the central business district area, that would remain Fareless.
Okay. Tiffany?
Just a quick question. Maybe I missed it, Fred. When we start talking about Fareless, what revenue are we looking at that to help the budget overall? Is that something you can project now?
The estimates are, and I want to be very careful on this, the estimates are that that it would be that the elimination of Fareless on the bus side only, which is all we're talking about here, that is to keep it on rail, the Fareless area on rail, would produce somewhere around $800,000 of additional revenue. What that really would expect is that people who are currently boarding within Fareless and are actually going across one of the bridges to the east side and should be paying a fare, that they would end up paying more fare if this proposal went in place. But you also have to, I think, evaluate how many of those people will walk across the bridge instead of doing it. It also requires us to be able to, even in a crowded bus setting, be able to regulate that by being able to make sure that people actually have that fare instrument. So I don't want to hold out that all of a sudden this is that solid level of revenue. I think there are going to be many factors that are at hand. It is, from our perspective, both an equity issue, but also a very important one in relationship just to putting our operators in an impossible situation, and that is to try to have to be the enforcer of Fareless, crossing that Fareless boundary on a crowded bus, slowing it down, and so on.